Welcome everyone to M365 UK, our November edition, and this is a special one, which is all following from the Ignite conference last week, all being virtual. And so, welcome to all of you, the regulars, as well as the new attendees. And I think the last I checked, we've got about 60 attendees registered. And I can still see folks joining in. So welcome once again to M365 UK. This is our 17th edition, so it happens every month. So for those of you who are new, I run this on a monthly basis, usually around middle of Wednesdays, and so tend to have a couple of sessions. But obviously this week, or for this month rather, it's an opportunity for me to welcome our MVP guests, Neil McLoughlin, Kevin, Anoop, Paul, Albert, and we'll head over to them shortly for the introductions. But really the agenda today is very informal, really kind of just our opportunities to share what everything about Ignite that there was through announcements, updates, roadmaps, but also to even learn from you as well, anything that caught your eye, and something that we or I may have missed. So it'd be good to understand some of those things as well. So it's very kind of discussion viewpoints, your perspectives around what you make of with Microsoft announcements and the general direction of where it's all heading and everything else. So we'll head over shortly to them. But for those of you who are obviously new or don't know me, I'm Chirag Patel. techchirag.com is the best way to get to me, and everything about M365 UK is posted there, including the links to the videos and slides and everything else. Worked with Patel Consulting as a Microsoft 365 consultant, covering deployments, migrations, and been around for 20 odd years, and just kind of really keeping up with Microsoft 365 space in general. But yeah, feel free to connect with me, and if I'm able to help you out in any ways. Just so you know, we have the final session of the year next month on 8th of December. So we got a couple of sessions there on Microsoft 365 Insider Risk Management, as well as all things Microsoft Viva from our wonderful speakers, Matt, Sarah, and Leslie. So event page is already posted on meetup.com/M365 UK. So you can head over there and register if that kind of catches your attention there. But at the same time, if you feel you want to submit your session and would love to welcome you, doesn't have to be all 45 minutes, even if it's 15, 20 minutes, your point, it doesn't matter, any subject to do, as long as it's M365, then that's the main thing. So feel free to submit your session and I'll take a look at that as well. And of course, those are the links there as well, so you can access the YouTube and videos and sessions. So this session obviously is being recorded and will be made available sometime this weekend. But just like to say to everyone, this is very kind of very informal way of getting ourselves here. So please respect the language and reactions you post in the chat post. Everything is open here, so just like to make sure we have a happy medium and we don't offend anybody on here as well. So yeah, with that, I think just give I'd like to welcome Neil, who's been an MVP for I think about a year, who kind of all things Azure Virtual Desktop, and in fact Kevin and Anoop as well as Office and apps MVPs. Paul has been around a few years in obviously SharePoint development originally, and then carrying on with the baton with other areas of it, and also Albert from the Netherlands covering around the security and modern workplace in general as well. So, but I'd like to hand over to them to at least give them a chance to introduce themselves. And maybe just start off with, kind of at a high level, what really kind of caught your attention at Microsoft Ignite with your introduction. So I'll probably start with Neil, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chirag. So my name is Anoop McLoughlin. I currently work as a UK field CTO for a company called Nadio. As Chirag touched upon, I've been an MVP for 2 years now. So this is my second year. So my speciality sits with Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. I'm actually MVP in sort of enterprise mobility. So yeah, I mean, Ignite this year was quite interesting for me. What I quite found interesting was there wasn't much focus on Azure Virtual Desktop, but there was quite a lot of focus on sort of Windows 365. That seems to be sort of Microsoft's baby at the moment, as it were. So, but the biggest perspective which I took from the Azure Virtual Desktops, well, probably the only major announcement for Azure Virtual Desktop was the sort of integration with Azure Stack ACI. So for a long time, people deploying Azure Virtual Desktop have been struggling. As we all know, with cloud deployments today, people love the word hybrid because they don't want to go all in. They think, I mean, it's not really helped because Azure's had a few outages recently. So it doesn't try to convince those people who say, oh, don't worry, it's all going to be fine. Well, we had a total outage around a couple of weeks ago now, which took down the whole of the Azure. For every single Azure Virtual Desktop user, which does not help at all. So Microsoft, I didn't actually know this was coming. So Microsoft announced at night, obviously they integrated, people have been saying it's been needed for a while. So they've enabled the Azure Virtual Desktop service on the Azure Stack ACI, which is quite good because I mean, Azure Stack used to be immensely expensive because you had to go to Microsoft and pay lots and lots and lots of money. But I think now they've kind of opened it up to sort of third-party vendors and sort of like you sort of UCS type scenarios and your Dells and all those kind of things. So you can have it on-prem Azure at a more sort of reasonable cost. I don't know the exact price, but I believe it starts around £100,000, which isn't accessible to everyone. But for those kind of enterprise deployments where money's no object, which we do have those occasionally, I think it's definitely a good thing to look at. But one thing to be wary of, I mean, I've not actually got hands-on with it yet, but I've seen some walkthroughs, and it's not Azure Virtual Desktop in the traditional sense. You have to deploy VMs onto your Azure Stack ACI cluster, and then essentially manually join them to the Azure Virtual Desktop service. You register with the service, and then you can use them using obviously the existing Azure. So it's Azure Virtual Desktop control software, and then obviously that registers with the whole black plane service. So
right.
Quite interesting. The other big one which caught my eye was Windows 365 support for Azure AD. Azure AD for me, it's going to be a game changer. I'm talking about native Azure AD join, absolute game changer. Because the biggest complaint that we get from people when they're trying to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 now is, why am I still deploying Azure Active Directory? Why am I having to spin up a domain controller? So Microsoft announced they're releasing native Azure AD join for Windows 365, and that's coming to Azure Virtual Desktop as well. So hopefully there's going to be legacy applications, obviously, which are still going to have that requirement for sort of LDAP and those kind of stuff. But over time, obviously, we're going to see Active Directory disappear and have a native Azure AD come in. So interesting. They were the two major ones that caught my eye anyway.
No, that's a good one. That's a nice one. I mean, I've probably got one of them in there, which I didn't even really come across from that one. So that's really good. Thanks, Neil. And then obviously, throughout this, we will obviously kind of catch up on other bits and pieces. You can do that. But yeah, next, if I can pass it on to Kevin. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Kevin McDonnell. I'm the practice lead for Modern Workplace at a company called CPS. It's not the Crown Prosecution Service, despite what many secretaries get very nervous when you turn up. Back in the old days, the look of panic on their face was always quite entertaining for you to explain, no, we're just IT geeks. So we look after all things Microsoft. To say, I'm on the Modern Workplace, really focusing on the kind of collaboration elements, so Teams, SharePoint, Yammer, as well as employee experience and Viva, Office Apps and Services MVP on there, and also make sure I'm pointing in the right direction, the co-host of the Grey Hat Beard podcasts. So go to greyhatbeard.com, all one word, or search for Grey Hat Beard in your podcast providers. Give us a listen. We were chatting afterwards the other night and saying we really should make more of the kind of pitch that we're like that post SharePoint, that chat you have after a user group when you've had a couple of beers, especially we record on a Monday night. We're often quite tired by then, and we tend to ramble a bit. So it's a little bit like that. We've had the dubious honour of someone saying it's really nice to have on in the background without really distracting you too much, and I take that as a compliment from there. So yeah, do give a listen. And we did do we've put out 2 episodes around Ignite recently, so I'm going to dubiously steal some of the things from that. I think the 2 big elements that have come through, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about this later, were loop and context IQ. So that ability to really make use of the fluid framework. I think what's got me interested is that ability to have that kind of live collaborating, seeing it in one place. I think it's, use my words carefully, interesting that they've created a brand new app, so you've got somewhere else to go from it. I'm hoping that's going to be like Delve and will slowly disappear into the background as kind of more and more the features come out, but it's nice they've given that availability. I have to be honest that the loop was interesting. I think the context queue is something that will be a lot more interesting and people will engage with, even if they don't really notice it that much. That ability for it to recommend, it's that everyday AI to recommend documents that may be relevant within your email as you're typing, not just the bits at the bottom, but to allow you to select those based on what you're writing. And I think that's where a lot of this power comes through and be really interesting and probably use without anyone noticing it. It'll just sneak in there and people start doing things with it and getting a lot of benefit. And I think that's definitely going to be a great part from there. The other side I mentioned, do a lot with employee experience, the Viva announcements. Slightly tricky because a lot of them, they're kind of saying things are going live that they've been kind of leading up to for a while. So we've seen them all the pillars now are under general availability. They announced the ally.io. The interesting one was finally they've gone and said, yes, there is going to be an all-in license. So whereas you had to pay for 3 of the pillars separately, general listed price of $4 per user per month, now you can get a single rolled up one of $9, at least until August. But we gloss over it a little bit on that. And I think it's great because we are seeing a lot of organizations who really do want to put all of them. They're kind of umming and ahhing whether to leave ones, especially learning, we're seeing, or topics, depending on the type of organization, they're often leaving those slightly out. So to have that kind of gain of the license, I think will help some of those as well. Yeah, but I'm sure we'll come on to those a bit later.
Good. Thanks for that, Kevin. Absolutely. Okay, so Anoop, welcome, Anoop.
Yeah, thank you, Chirag, and thank you for organizing this session. My name is Anoop Tatti. I am a developer architect at a company called as Content and Cloud here in UK. I became an MVP just recently, in fact, 9 days back. So yeah, we've been office development space. Yeah, thank you very much. Very much excited about the new development capabilities that were announced in Ignite. Actually there were quite a few of elements related to development that were announced in Ignite. However, the ones that caught my attention were the ones related to Viva Connections dashboard. We can create these things called as ACEs or adaptive card extensions. We can create our custom adaptive card extensions using the SharePoint framework toolkit that we already have. So if you've been developing SharePoint framework web parts or extensions, there's no need to learn anything new to create the adaptive card extensions. So the framework is all the same, and there are some really nice videos and blog articles by the community on how to create the Viva Connection ACEs. So with those, we can fill up the Viva Connection dashboard, so we can have our custom adaptive card extensions that fits the needs of the organization. Say, for example, roll up all the issues in the tenant. Or another example might be show me the status of all the London Underground tube lines, something like that. So all those maybe something related to ServiceNow, etc. So we can create all these custom cards and then show them in the dashboard. So when you open the Viva Connections app on your mobile, or when you go to the home site in your tenant, which has the dashboard, it shows you these adaptive card extensions. So yeah, the announcement related to that, the toolkit being generally available, that's very interesting. So I'm sure in the future there'll be a lot of adaptive card extensions that will be developed. And there were some announcements related to building Teams app as well. So we've got the new Teams toolkit version 2. Quite excited about that as well. So I haven't used it myself, but I have seen quite a few blog articles around that, and yeah, it's really amazing. So in the future, when for developing Teams apps, the toolkit is brilliant. Yeah, apart from that, there were quite a few general updates on Microsoft Graph, which anything related to Microsoft Graph and development is always interesting. All these new APIs that come up, and then keeping up with those APIs, which do quite a few things. It's really cool. So yeah, that's it from my side. And thank you once again. Yeah.
No, that's good, and I think it's pretty cool, isn't it? Because even because I come across this a lot, that SharePoint framework, for example, is only to develop SharePoint related components, but easily to be forgotten that it's also used for Teams as well as, like you mentioned.
They really need to rename it now.
I think they ought to, isn't it?
It needs a new name.
Yes, yeah.
But no, that's good. Great stuff. Paul, over to you. I think that's the way kind of Paul's been around, and I think I kind of look up to Paul for many years. Some of you already are familiar. I even saw some familiar faces just cropping up. I think I saw Tony Pounder.
I just saw Tony Pounder pop in. Yeah. So hello everyone. I'm Paul Hunt. I'm the principal consultant for Modern Workplace with a company called Trustmark, another gold partner in the UK. I've been around the community for a long time, since 2007. I think that was when I first started working with SharePoint. And for those that have been to any of the London events, I used to run the SharePoint user group in the UK. And I'm also involved with Collab Days, which is kind of the replacement to SharePoint Saturdays. And I'm sure Tony won't mind me saying that we are going to be doing Collab Days UK in the spring. So watch this space. We'll be announcing it.
Yay!
So we've just started the planning this week, and we'll be announcing when and where in the near future. So that'll be good. So for me, Ignite, Teams. It was all about Teams for me. My life at the moment is Teams. I've been working with a roughly 70,000 seat organisation, and the last 18 months we've been rolling out Teams to help them through the pandemic. Who hasn't been doing that? I think everyone has been. And some of the changes that were announced, Mesh, Teams Mesh, if anyone saw it, they probably saw this really gimmicky thing about, people with 2D avatars and then going into a 3D workspace. But I'm doing a lot of work with clients that are thinking about the accessibility. We spend 10 hours a day on video calls, and you get to that 4 o'clock call and you think, I've really had enough. I don't want to turn my camera on. So the ability to pop up an avatar,
apart from Wednesdays with the M365 UK user group, obviously.
But the ability to pop up an avatar and have it, convey your reactions and convey your emotions to the rest of the meeting, but not having to have your visible face there. Having an off-camera day, having a bad hair day. So we looked at something that looks quite gimmicky. But actually, when we talk about things like accessibility and inclusion, it becomes a really, really powerful tool. When we take the next step and we push into that virtual reality space and we talk about maybe having spatial gatherings where I can maybe onboard the new employees, we can go to that area where you've got the table tennis table, and then you can break out into individual rooms. And just by walking into that space, I leave that conversation, I join this conversation. We start to recreate some of what we've taken for granted in the physical world, but in the, in the more in the virtual environment. And I think it was quite interesting that Accenture, as part of that story, have rolled out 60,000 virtual reality headsets to all their staff. Now, I think we've still got some way to go with some of the headsets. I've got a Quest 2, and I can wear it for about half an hour. After that, it starts to get really heavy, and I haven't upgraded the straps or anything on it. So, I think we're a little way from, those kind of consumer headsets being comfortable for several hours and longer and things like that. But, some of these things that we've been looking at, and just the focus from Microsoft on accessibility and inclusion and how the technologies helps that for me has been a really biggie. And just making Teams so much more accessible. Some of the functionality that's coming with the webinars, the managed meeting, the stuff they talked about, the green room, being able to control whose camera is visible. These are the things that we've been doing in Teams Live. And if anyone's run a Teams Live session, you're going to know it's not the most controllable environment. But bringing that much more fluid experience into the Teams meetings, that for me wins it. I've been working quite closely with the product group on that, which is quite nice. So it's nice to see something that you've been feeding into come out in GA. So so seeing that roll out next year is going to be really good.
Nice one, Paul.
I think it's a quick question around Teams, just what's in my head. Are Microsoft still looking to rewrite Teams? Because obviously I live and breathe in sort of virtual desktops, and obviously we all know how horrible Teams is to run on virtual desktops. And I heard at one stage that Microsoft were completely rewriting it to make it behave better. Is that still the case?
Yes, I mean, you're seeing that already with Windows 11. You're seeing the new Teams native experience, or Web 2.0. I'm not sure what they're officially calling it. I don't know how much has been announced, so I think we'll skirt quietly around the NDA and say I wouldn't be surprised if the Windows 11 experience becomes the way of doing things.
It's a proper version, isn't it?
To pick that up, the Windows 11 version is the Teams personal.
Yeah, you can't use it.
So
company.
It's intended for personal usage. They have announced publicly that they're also working on the business edition. But they
have they announced that now? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Right, that's fine.
Yeah, well, I was playing with that yesterday. You get two download options, isn't it? You get the personal one and the corporate on the work and school. And it's interesting. I was talking to my son because he installed the whole thing yesterday, and he was saying, "Well, how much memory is that going to take up?"
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you've got to think about that. Teams today is built on top of Eclipse as a framework, and Eclipse as a framework is just hungry. It takes a lot of memory. And I think if you look at where Teams was 2 years ago to where it is today, the footprint of Teams is actually smaller than it was, considering all the new features they've added. It's not unusual for me to see Teams hit 1.2 gig of memory and absolutely whack the CPU. One of the biggest problems we have, and certainly at my current client, is security software and companies that aren't putting the right exceptions in place, because we're starting to see, Teams generates a lot of files on the fly. There's a lot of caching, and if we don't put the right antivirus extensions in, exemptions in, we start to see things like, the AV start to pump up, and then if you've got things like Tanium, which is like a monitoring software, that starts to creep up because it's seeing the AV increase. So we need to also look at what else is running on the machines. It's not always down to Teams. I think that's quite important for companies to understand, is your security monitoring software should really be in the background. It shouldn't be taking over. So keep an eye on things like that.
I think it's a really interesting point from Neil about having it run on VMs as well. Be interesting though if I know they're looking at making it generally run faster, be a smoother. They have publicly talked about changing from Electron to, and I keep forgetting what the new platform is, and rewriting that. But I don't think they've said anything about it being more efficient on VMs and those, especially with things like Windows 365. But Windows 365 is there. They're going to have the 11. I'll be very surprised if something wasn't happening with that.
The way they're doing that, they're rolling stuff into the actual clients themselves. So if you look at like the release notes for the remote desktop client for the past couple of releases, there've been a lot of Teams improvements. So they're sort of working on the interaction between the client and the actual Teams client sitting on the VM, and then the actual remote desktop client itself to make that improvement a lot better. So it is getting better and better and better. So
yeah, I've just shared a link in chat. The thing to understand is looking at what's available between Teams on the web, Teams desktop, and VDI. And it's that VDI channel that's really important in that particular document, because that's what's, they're showing you what's available to VDI. We've hit a real problem in the current client who are Citrix users. So Teams
and that's the problem, full stop.
Well, that's the problem, full stop, yeah. So Teams makes something available to VDI, which means that chances are that's going to come to AVD really, really quickly. The problem is it doesn't come to Citrix that quickly, because Citrix have a much slower release cadence, and then my client doesn't patch their Citrix until every quarter. So we're already 9 months behind. So the comparison between Teams desktop and Citrix desktop is horrible, absolutely horrible. And it's created a kind of a them and us within the organization. So we're really, really keen to move to AVD as quickly as possible and address that.
Yeah, I mean, because I work with a lot of virtual clients, and what a lot of them actually end up doing is running Teams outside of a virtual desktop. So, I mean, if you're connecting from a device, it's normally a thin client, or it's normally a PC or something. Sometimes people get the best user experience by continuing to use the virtual desktop, but just don't run Teams inside the virtual desktop, running on the actual hosted device that you run it from. So there are quite a few vendors which do that naturally, like iGel, for example. They have Teams installed on their client devices because they want you to run it natively rather than inside the VM itself. Because, I mean, we can try to do as best as it can with the Teams running on virtual desktop, but it will never, ever, ever, ever be as good or as natural as running it locally.
Yeah.
Because the way it works.
This guy, they're doing it for security reasons, so I can run on a home PC and get in, and so we're not going to be able to have that connection. So I'm conscious we haven't introduced Albert yet. Sorry, Chirag.
Yeah, no, that's a nice segue. Absolutely. No, these are good discussions, but I think welcome, Albert, and please, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chirag. Thanks, Paul, and all the others. Albert Hoitingh. I'm a consultant based here in the Netherlands, in The Hague. I'm mostly focused on compliance, risk, and security on Microsoft 365. Which means I'm very interested in anything to do with information protection, running teams securely, information governance, data loss prevention, new privacy management, which I'll go into in a couple of minutes. So it's a very broad area of expertise. But I also love other things, cloud, and also other things, Microsoft 365, all the things which were announced during Ignite on a more modern work related topics. Looking at security, risk, and compliance, I think there's 3 major categories, if you will. There were a lot of announcements going around based on features becoming general available. There were also some new features which were very, very interesting to look at, and there's also some product renames, and I'll just go into them. First of all, those product renames, probably you've noticed them. It's around security right now. It's all about Microsoft Defender, or Microsoft's full stop. For just a couple of examples, Azure Sentinel right now is now the Microsoft Sentinel. Kevin, that's right. I even saw someone call it Microsoft Defender for Defender. So just put Microsoft Defender in front of it, and it kind of works, because now you've got Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is basically the security, the Azure Security Center and Azure Defender combined. We've got a rename for Microsoft Cloud App Security. For people doing presentations on that subject, it's kind of a hassle, because now I have to really rename all those terms, because now it's Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. We've got Microsoft Defender for IoT, so it's really a strategy just to go Microsoft Defender. That's one of the things I picked up at Ignite. The other things, a lot of things were announced, which were either in private preview or in public preview for some time, and which have become general available. And there's some little gems in there as well. If you look for just a very couple of examples, co-authoring of protected documents, for example, using Microsoft Information Protection. for those of you who've experienced the workings of Microsoft information protection and encrypted files, especially when you use the Office apps themselves, not the cloud apps, it's a hassle because the document is being checked out. There's no really co-authoring anymore. Autosave is disabled, all because of that encryption, and that has been solved right now. So you do need to do something in your tenants to activate the new, this new functionality, but then you do have that co-authoring experience even within encrypted files. So that was a very cool feature, I think. There's a couple of other things, DLP for macOS, for example, which might sound a bit weird, but Microsoft really is looking at Mac OS very, very constantly, basically. And for Windows 10, we already had endpoint data loss prevention, which allows you to set limits on, for example, copy pasting information or storing it in on a USB drive, or even sharing it with using Bluetooth. You can really set limits on that, and that's going into Mac OS right now as well. So that's very, very cool. And some other things were more not security related, but more information governance related. So we've got, for example, things like adaptive scopes, which which basically in a nutshell allows you to set a query, and based on that query, the retention period of certain information will start to run. Right now, for example, if you want to add several sites, SharePoint sites, to a specific retention policy, then you really have to add those sites themselves. So in some cases, you even have to copy paste the URL of the site or the OneDrive location into that policy. With adaptive scopes, you simply can say, well, I have for example, based on the URL or a site property or a property of the user within Active Directory or of a group in Active Directory, you can really have the name says it all, adaptive scope for your retention. So that's really going to be very, very handy, especially if you have a good governance structure already in place for teams, sites, etc. So that's very cool. Good. To end it from, there's one thing I noticed you didn't talk about in your introductions, so I'm going to talk about it, if you will. Shared channels. In Teams, the new way of really working with external entities within your organization without the need to switch a tenant from Teams, without the need to really add guest users to your tenant. To be very, very honest, if you look at it from the Microsoft Ignite perspective, you probably think, oh, that's a very, very cool feature. We can start using that right away. But yeah, there's a little catch, and that's you do need the new feature within Azure AD for that, Azure AD B2B Direct Connect. Yeah. And the organizations want to use those shared channels, and well, why not? I think it's very, very cool feature. They really need to trust each other, so they need to set up a form of federation using Azure AD to start working with that. So
I think for me, Albert. Sorry, I think that one is in absolute answer to mergers and acquisitions. That day one experience, getting everyone on board,
right?
It just answers that straight from the bat.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's fantastic for that. It's a real shame that B2B requirement is in there. You know, for those of us who either work with many clients and want to be able to switch tenants there, who work with the community channels, I felt that was a little bit of a kick in the nuts.
You kind of got to understand that. I mean, we've all had that conversation with InfoSec, and they're like, "What do you mean we've got to invite them into our tenant?" Can you imagine saying, "Oh yeah, we're just going to, allow anyone"? That conversation with InfoSec is always a hard one. So at least we've got a level of control in place by saying there's got to be this relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by the way, that relationship isn't always two-directional. You can set like inbound rules, outbound rules, or both. And I think we're going to work with those InfoSec people to try to sort that out, and I think it's going to work from a user perspective, I can't wait. I mean, I've working with a lot of clients. I've got a lot of tenant switching, and I've got like browser sessions open with Teams, the client open with Teams.
Yeah.
So
it's going to reduce a lot of noise, and I think I think the whole idea is that productivity scenario, which we always aim for, like, and it's not like if it's new, right? It's been there for years. When we work with externals, it's just seems a bit of a disconnect, isn't it? When you have to jump and hop on and off between tenants and so on. So it's like, hopefully, next quarter.
Yeah, it's not just externals. I mean, my main client at the moment, they've got a subsidiary of around 4,000 users that have their own tenant. And so I'm getting asked by, the business saying, well, why can't I work with Sam in this particular client? Because I can't share a document with her because we don't allow sharing, or the experience isn't that smooth. Whereas, shared channels, I'm just going to be able to invite them into a team and work as if they were part of the same organization. That, for me, it just removes that whole friction. So, I said mergers and acquisitions, but even just subsidiary companies, it's going to address that for so many companies. It's going to be, it's just going to be more frictionless, it can only benefit the end users.
Yeah,
I think they're definitely investing a lot more in that kind of connected company. I saw with the Viva Connections that you're going to be able to have multiple home sites coming through as part of that. So it's that ability where you're sharing a tenant between multiple. There's going to be the search capability where you can federate search between two organizations. I think Microsoft's seeing that as an area of growth. The MAD, as they call it, really is quite a big route where a lot of things are going to happen.
Good. Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways I got, I think, was that the fact that I think a lot of the sessions were kind of starting out, or at least making the point that hybrid is here because of we've been forced to work remotely and all those things. And it kind of, what amazes me, I think, is the fact in the sheer timescale to bring out all these capabilities and features to kind of address. To me, I just didn't have any, because I know some of these things were announced back in March, which a lot of these things were in build, and to come back 6 months, 8 months time to bring some of those out, I think it was quite impressive. And like you mentioned, Paul, about the mesh for Teams, that whole experience kind of building on from the early days is kind of a good one to see. I think what I would like to do, is just maybe just go through a few slides, if I may, and just looking at the time-wise as well. And I think, obviously, I do want to give you the opportunity, all the attendees as well, to bring your questions. But I think please feel free to post them in the chat window, or unmute yourself and just ask the question. We'll go through the announcements now anyways, and some of those questions you may have, we may end up covering in the slides themselves anyway. So there's about 8 or 10 slides just kind of covering high level stuff, sort of thing. So I know we picked up on Loop was one of the major announcements in Microsoft Ignite, and I'm sure some of you may have already come across it. I think I in fact probably saw a couple of blogs today, I think, where this is already in preview coming out on our Teams, as long as you're kind of using the OneDrive on that machine as well, that kind of bring everything together. But for those of you, I kind of walked away that this is more from Microsoft Loop being communication first, AI first. So yes, to kind of to bring everything together and all the components, pages and workspaces. But the way I look at it is, I thought it was more about a structured chaos because we have files and chats and all these things happening all over the place. So I thought it's kind of bringing some of that chaos in a more kind of a structured way, which I think is that's my viewpoint anyways around this. But yeah, it was quite interesting to see some of those demos around being able to create your status trackers and voting options as one of those components. What was your viewpoints on some of the and attendees? Please also speak out in what you thought about Microsoft Loop.
I think it's just a shame there's somewhere else you have to go to. It's just that new app.
Yeah.
It's like, is it in Yammer? Is it in Teams? Is it in Outlook? Is it in SharePoint? Is it in Loop now?
It's in everywhere.
And I think the Loop everywhere will be great. But
so I've been playing with it a bit. It appeared in our Teams channels literally earlier this week, and I've been playing with the lists, and it's it's interesting, and I've talked about a few scenarios with colleagues, and we've said, when you're putting together a document and you want someone's input, but you don't want to share the whole document with them. There might be stuff in that document they shouldn't see. Being able to do like a loop paragraph or a loop table with them and say, can you fill this bit out for me, and then bringing it in. One of my biggest concerns is point in time. So if I send an email with a loop component and someone makes a decision based on that, and then an hour later the content changes, and we come back and said, well, why did you make that decision? Well, that's because it's changed. Why did this change? Coming from a financial background, it's really important that we have checks and balances and audit. So there is going to be a time and a place for loop, and there's going to be a time and a place to just use an email or send a Word document. And I think it's going to be important that we position this correctly with the business.
Yeah.
In that loop mechanism, is it like, does it tell you who's changed what? Or does it just change it in the document?
So there is, you get a .fluid file in your OneDrive, and you can see the version history on that. But you can't view old versions of it at the moment. But I mean, let's face it, this is in preview. It's going to change. But I've just been playing with it a little bit this week. At the moment, I want to see maybe slightly better version control, version history, things like that, just so that, if someone turns around and says, I went and purchased this based on your recommendation on this document and that changed, and, why did that happen? So I think that's going to be somewhere we're going to have to just keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, because in most sort of large enterprise environments I've worked in, every document has to go through very strict version control, right? The version has to go up. It needs to have change tracking turned on, that kind of thing. So you can, as you said, you can track who's done what. So it'll be interesting to see how they control all that if they're allowing sort of a lot of different people to edit different sections of the document.
I think it would generally be tracked. I know Paul's had more detail on it, but I think it'd be tracked at the source level. So you'll still have that source document. It'll be in SharePoint. You've got your version control and limitations from there. So sorry, not limitations, and control and governance around that. So I think that'll be safe. And then if you've got D365, you'll have whatever version control you've applied with there. So I think the same components will be there. I see Tony just replied to Amy, but very much be integrated. I really have a feeling that Loop app itself won't have a particularly long lifespan. I think it's there to kind of demonstrate. In the same way, when Delve came along, the key function of that was to show what the graph could do. It could show the power of the graph and get people to that. And gradually, all the functionality of that has started to disappear and reappear in other places. I keep waiting for it to vanish completely. And I think the same with Loop. It's an opportunity to show what the Fluid framework can do. To talk, you've got on the page here that the sort of Loop components, Loop pages, I think they will become the much bigger one. They just need their marketing thing, and that's why the names come out. It's not just Fluid framework, it's an actual tool itself to help people understand it more. I think Fluid framework had been bouncing around for a while and just didn't quite land with people. They didn't see the benefits of it. This is helping, trying to get that through, however long it lasts. Yeah,
I do have a concern about it using OneDrive. So I create a document, I put a Loop component in the document, I share that widely, and then I leave the organization, and 30 days later my OneDrive gets deleted. What happens to that Fluid component?
Yeah.
And more importantly, what happens to these documents that reference it? So I think there's a few things that definitely need looking at.
Yeah, everything to look forward to, right? It's good. I think the next area was Viva. I think, as we know, like this was obviously, I do find, I think, Kevin, you picked up interestingly as well. I think I've seen so many times where something's been said that it's gone GA, but it's like, especially from a connections point of view, that's been around for a few months. And I think obviously they've gone GA with some of the things like Toolkit, like you mentioned there, Anoop, earlier on. But yeah, absolutely, kind of streamlining that whole pricing model and making it easier to go in. But what I tend to find is, if you look at it if you was to contrast with the spending that goes on in terms of how in this hybrid world where some of the spending patterns have changed, where if a lot of us are working from home and where some of the expenses, for example, that would have required to have the employees and contractors in the workplace, to me, that this kind of pricing offsets to an extent in order to have that in place. And that's again, more from my understanding in terms of organizations saying that it's expensive to implement because of the license costs and also the implementation, everything else. I would just probably want to see out there if anyone actually has tried to implement all these modules, and obviously with ally.io coming around next year, if you kind of include that in your license, just on that one. And obviously we got other integration points coming up as well. What's the thoughts? What's the kind of, if you like, the outlook, if you like, on that in terms of how you see this going? Because it seems a bit of a burdensome cost, right?
I think, funny enough, Andrew, I was about to say exactly the same thing. We're starting to work with organisations and build out that return on investment, that ROI for each of these. I think when it comes to certainly things like topics, that money you've saved by being able to put that information in front of people. I'm slightly cynical about these numbers. I'm not going to lie. It's like, oh, you've saved 5 minutes a day by clicking on this link instead of searching around for things. Yeah, the reality is, if we took all those amounts of money you'd saved, you'd be in a hell of a lot of profit just by sitting there and doing nothing. So there's a certain pinch of salt you've got to take with that, but it's certainly balances off the amount of time taken if people use it. If you have the governance in place, certainly when it comes to topics, about going through curating those topics, making sure that those knowledge owners actually taking things through on there. When it comes to insights, we're seeing more and more organizations that are coming up with these big employee experience, employee engagement plans, but they're not working out how they're measuring success. You talked about the hybrid worlds, Chirag. It used to be that managers and leaders could walk around the office and you get a feel for the buzz of the place. Are people overworking? Are people happy? What's the feeling on there? The point of Viva Insights is to try and get, the workplace analytics side of Viva Insights is to try and get some of that feeling from what's actually taking place. Are people always in meetings? How much chat is taking place? Are people focusing, etc.? Getting some of that information, and it's getting better and better. We've just turned it on because they've now got the CSP licensing, so you can get your per user even for small organizations for Viva Insights, and we've just turned it on ourselves to look at that, to get those stats out. And it's fascinating. It's taking that assumption of what you think people are doing and then getting the evidence on it, using tools like Glint as well, which we have, and we had pre-Viva conversations on there to see what people are saying and marrying all those two things up. Really, really interesting insights as well.
Kevin, are you seeing much fear around the workplace analytics? Now, it's a slightly loaded question because I'm working in a multi-geo environment, and I'll be honest, Germany, Insights is going nowhere near them because they just won't allow it.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, we're seeing positive things because what we've gone in and said, yes, there is that worry about that personal ones, in which case you can control, you cannot, with Viva Insights, see an individual. So as an organization, you cannot look at an individual's details. It aggregates up to a minimum of 5 people. So you're already starting to look at smaller ones, and you can increase that. You can define your own limit. So organizations, some of the larger ones we're looking at, are looking at department levels. They're not looking at the lower level teams to get that insights. And in fact, the Workers' Council, we're actually seeing them as being the proponent of it, because they can look at how much support is going on for people working outside of hours, how much support there is for burnout. It's giving them the ammunition for all the things they're trying to get pushed over the line. So actually they're one with another organization we're working with, they are actually the ones pushing for it rather than the other way around.
I might does make a nice change, because it's the Workers' Council that's making my life hell at the moment.
It usually is. So I've had that Yammer and the Workers' Council still makes me shiver. But
we're struggling still with rolling Yammer out to our German colleagues there as well for exactly the same reason. So
but no,
what
things going better. Sorry, sure.
No, I can carry on. I'm just very quickly, I was going to say, what happens when you have the workforce that's constantly on the move, right? A lot of people changing jobs and coming and going, right? There's a lot of that happening. And when you look at some of this stuff, how much of that really kind of resonates the reality, if you like?
I'd like to think that workplace analytics maybe gives them an insight as to why there's so much turnover in some places. You'd think that during a pandemic, people wouldn't change jobs. They'd want to stay secure. But actually, there's been more job movement in the last 12 months than there would normally be. So it's interesting. People are maybe looking for the better options and moving to companies that are supporting the remote working better and things like that. But no,
something to, I think, have a look. And I think, of course, Viva Learning went into GA as well, and obviously you got your standard and the premium kind of packs around that to be able to access some of those learnings. I think the learning recommendations was the one that caught my eye as well, being able to sort of not just recommend to your colleagues and teams, but being able to also track in terms of the take up on that kind of stuff. So getting that insight from that as well. So if you come across any courses, learning modules, or whatever it is, then that's quite interesting to have a look as well. Okay, Teams and SharePoint is probably kind of going to go hand in hand. I think obviously the big one was the real-time call quality analytics that kind of just went, I think, before the first day of Ignite. But again, I think that's not like up to the second by any chance, is it, in terms of getting that, but it does help, at least on the spot when there's a meeting going on, being able to understand some of the patterns around that in terms of the join leave times and so on. We covered off Mesh for Microsoft Teams in a bit of detail. My only point around that is, why haven't they got legs? It's like, it just doesn't feel right for me, in a sense that being able to kind of do that. But take a point, Paul, earlier on, better than to watch the bubbles with letters, right? Than to see the avatar of that.
Yeah, and there was a number of things. I mean, like the live translation on the fly. I can talk in my native language and get subtitles in Mandarin, or that kind of inclusivity. And I know I've already talked about quite a bit about accessibility and inclusivity. That's become a real focus for me in my current role. So seeing these kind of things, I mean, there's a couple of other things they popped up, like sending chat messages later. That's brilliant. I mean, I'm in a multi-geo environment. I'm working with guys in America. So when I send them a message at 8:30 in the morning, my time, they really don't want to be receiving that at 2:30 in the morning if they've got their mobile next to them. I'd like to think that they've got them switched them to silent, but hey, you never know. So being able to send it later. And the other thing that's coming up on the people card is time zone. Being able to see someone's time zone, and it's going to say 4 hours behind you or 6 hours ahead of you. It's those kind of things that we're seeing just creeping in, just sometimes the smallest of things, but it has a massive impact on the workplace.
But also from a compliance perspective, I really want to focus on what you're saying, Paul. Like it's the little things. From a compliance perspective, there's a lot of little things being added. For example, e-discovery right now. I think it's GA. I'm not really sure. I think it is. You can, when you share a file within the conversation, for example, and you share it with a link. And for example, it's stored in another OneDrive or another SharePoint location. When you do an advanced e-discovery search, the search engine can now retrieve that document from its location and include it in the e-discovery results. So that's a thing which, well, if you're interested like me, then you probably pick up on it. But if you don't, it's just one of those little things which are announced and which are now available in the platform. So yeah, I'm really happy about that, because, well, from a compliance perspective, that really does, well, make it more complete. And I think you're seeing that the platform itself is getting a much higher maturity level right now than like a couple of years ago. So I really like where they're where it's going.
One of the small bit on. Sorry, go on, Chirag.
Yeah, carry on, Kevin.
I was going to say, one of the small bit on Teams I think was really nice that kind of slipped on the radar slightly was that delayed send. So it kind of partially come under the employee experience. I love it in Outlook. I love the fact that if I decide to work in the evenings because I need to catch up or done something during the day, I don't have to interrupt someone else's evening. I can to put the delayed send on the email, to have that ability with Teams messages as well. fantastic, really simple but nice win.
Yeah.
Good. I think there's a couple of things on here as well. I think, there's virtual meeting experiences. I think, things about assigning roles and being able to then kind of, monitor some of those things, making easier, I guess, to, have those meeting experiences around virtual green rooms and what have you. But also this events and hospitality management platform to manage the event life cycle. I think that's that kind of looked into that as well in terms of how that's going to bring about that.
It's just going to smooth that workflow process. For if you look at like the marketing team in a large, they work in Cvent, they set it up, but then they've got to go into Teams and set up the meeting and configure it. Whereas the intention with this is Cvent is going to do all of that for them. It's going to plug in, it's going to create the Teams meeting, it's going to configure it. Great, I can do it all in one platform. That's big for them.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a cost to that, is there? And I think that
there's going to be you're going to need to pay a license to Cvent. Cvent is a licensed service anyway. There is going to be my understanding is there's going to be an add-on to Cvent to be able to do that, but it's not going to be a lot.
Okay, no, good. And then the big one, of course, was I think this digital contact center solution, right? With Dynamics 365 and chat and voice kind of integrations within D365. I think I saw a couple of things out there. I think in terms of how the whole thing comes together and in terms of where that goes as a kind of a digital content will be quite interesting to see as well. But I think from anyone out there, I mean, do you have any points of view around that in terms of, because now the D365 elements of it is as it is quite huge, right? That whole area of that. What did you make of that? Anyone? Maybe we should get the Power Platform guys. Yeah, we should maybe get somebody from Power Platform, right? Who could probably talk an hours on that. But anyway, that's something that caught my eye. Anyways, probably need to research more into that as well in terms of the whole ins and outs.
The one thing I found intriguing, I don't know if you're doing more on Dynamics in a minute, but I found it very intriguing that there was a lot of things with that content center, like the ability from the voice to be able to see where tasks are and auto create a task off the bat of that. Fantastic. Why the hell are we not getting that in Teams? And it felt like in certain cases things are moving ahead in Dynamics that feel like they should be there in Teams as well. And since a little bit of an arms race going on, I would say the flip side, there's things like Loop and Context IQ, which are going to be there in Dynamics and across everything. It was good to see the two worlds coming together from that bit. That was a nice positive, but it certainly feels there's bits of Dynamics that kind of loop, if pardon the pun, looping into the Microsoft 365 and Teams world a little bit that caught me by surprise. So if you are more on the SharePoint team side of things, worth keeping an eye on that and go, hey, can we have that too?
Yeah, indeed. I think it's that kind of positioning of it, isn't it, in terms of how you view it, in terms of where this kind of flows. But it's certainly a huge area anyways, just to understand that part all in one solution. So
there was one interesting bit we talked, Al brought it up on Grey Hat Beard around the connected spaces in Dynamics as well. So that we've heard a lot about mesh and about the augmented reality side and virtual reality and seeing all the different elements there. The connected spaces kind of allowed you to monitor physical spaces. So whether it's kind of shop floors, factories, and looking at movement there, even movement in the office, and be able to reflect those in the environment and capture statistics around that. And I think we think about that augmented reality world very much of putting a helmet on and looking around things, but there's also trying to picture the real world and bring those stats into the digital world. Really
one step away from that automated time monitoring. You spent 5 minutes in the toilet.
Well, that could be an interesting one. The German worker council would definitely have something to say about that. But I thought it was very interesting that's kind of, they've talked a bit about it in Azure and things for a little while now. The fact that's going ahead in Dynamics and integrating with that, I thought was really intriguing.
What's the space? And then SharePoint, OneDrive. Who wants to take this one?
Chirag, apologies, I'm going to have to drop away as we go on to SharePoint, which is a favourite.
Absolutely, no, please do. And thanks for being here, and we'll catch up next time.
Not a problem. Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of the session.
So yeah, SharePoint, OneDrive, I think there's quite a lot, and I think the next one is more around the security compliance. I think a couple of things that really caught me. I think my attention here is, I think some of the sharing links and video transcription. You know, if your meetings are being recording and saved on your OneDrives, then I think you're now able to search those video transcriptions. Lists was probably the biggest area of this, anyways. I find, in terms of especially the offline.
The offline stuff.
Very cool. I know Jeff Teeper was pretty much excited on that. I think saw him tweeting on that. You know, how
you could see it in his eyes.
So that's a good one. I think some numbers there in terms of, obviously you have to have it on a machine that's got OneDrive sync app on it, and items with less than 250K. But regardless of the views, yet to see anyways in terms of the throttling. If you got more items in that list, then is that going to cause? But we're obviously being told, or at least been stated, that it doesn't cause issues from a performance point of view. But also, yeah, OneDrive, KFM for Mac OS. Was there anything else, Paul, you wanted to that I probably missed here in the Ignite for SharePoint OneDrive?
No, I was quite intrigued by the SharePoint Server Subscription Edition, but we've gone Exchange Server 2022. I really was expecting Exchange Server Subscription Edition as well, and that hasn't happened. So, yeah, intriguing one there. I mean, they said that SharePoint 2019 was going to be the last version, which they kind of have done there with the move to subscription edition. But I think that is going to be quite an interesting one.
They got rid of the numbers, right? They got rid of the year now and put it as a subscription edition. Which also
they said Windows 10 was going to be the last OS you'll ever need. So
who knows? And then obviously this includes the project server as well with that. And then obviously SharePoint tenant rename, which has been kind of going on, I think, a bit.
Yeah.
It's big.
Again, mergers and acquisitions, they're after that all the time.
Yeah, I did. I had to play with that, and I must say, I think in terms of looking at all the steps you have to go through, and in some of the things that, especially the limitations side of things, was quite intriguing just to really understand how. And obviously the public preview probably has got all those things probably settled anyways, but there are certainly a lot of limitations, and when you look at the huge list of it, it almost in a way puts you off from renaming the tenant. But it'll be another one to see anyway, at least because I come across a lot of migrations, and especially this year when I've done one of the divestment projects, and that was called out easily, that why don't we just rename once we've sold the company. Not easily done, but we'll see what that looks like for the future wise. From dev side of things, I know you've touched on a few things there. I think just to call out a couple of things here, I think the Microsoft 365 developer program has been around, I think 3-4 years now. I think something that I saw there as well is this new instance sandbox, and I think Paul and I know probably both of you speak from experience that I think when you have to kind of get things loaded, not only just the base platform is loaded, and that's good, but I think all the intricacies around the teams and SharePoint side of things, that hopefully kind of saves a lot of time, I think, for developers, and I think that was quite interesting to see.
I'm quite excited by this. I've spent 5 hours today cleaning up a machine, basically uninstalling Node, uninstalling NPM, doing all that, making it as clean as possible, and then reinstalling everything, which just takes so long. Being able to just spin up a development sandbox and get straight into SPFX, I love that idea. And I'm just going to pay for what I'm using. And okay, it's going to be a 36 gig memory machine. It's going to be a huge beast. It's probably going to cost a load of money. But if I'm only running it for the 2 hours I need to develop on, great. I'm all for that. And I mean, let's hear from Anoop, because it's definitely more his world than mine.
No. You said it. You covered what I wanted to say, and these kind of things, they encourage people to develop more and more related to SharePoint and Office, Microsoft 365, obviously. So in my case, for me, I used to have an Azure VM, a Linux VM, and then connect to that VM using SSH and then do the development rather than doing it locally. But this, with the introduction of this sandbox, those kind of things are just not needed. You are there, and then the data is also there, so you have everything you need to work, and then you can just start coding. So it's quite cool.
Yeah. Well, what about the other items on this slide here, which I know from your perspective, Sarah, things adding team channel members in bulk and some of the APIs, especially Microsoft Graph Data Connect, which is in preview, which then allows you now to be able to harvest some of that data out and store it in Azure for analytical purposes and all those things. What do you make of that, the Graph Data Connect?
So I haven't played myself with Data Connect yet. I need to dig deep into that. However, all these announcements that have come out in Ignite from the developer perspective, it's like Microsoft take the feedback and then work on them and then release them. So that's quite good to see. One of the other things is this fluid relay service, which I think comes back to the Microsoft loop. They have made a lot of improvements on the fluid relay service and then exposed some of the items and then showed how developers can make use of that service in order to customize some of the bits related to the fluid framework. So it's all quite intriguing, and especially the main thing is earlier developing in anything related to Microsoft apps was a bit more difficult, but now that's not the case. The development platform itself has been made as in it's like if you know a bit of Node.js and you've been developing, using all the different React frameworks and everything, you can just start using those. There's no need to learn new skills to do SPFX development. So that's quite good. And on the other side, you still have your Azure function development using your favorite languages. So it's it's like Microsoft listen to what the feedback is from developers and then implement those. So it's quite good.
Yeah, it's good to see that. It's good to see that. I think, and there are a lot of previews here, isn't it? Like things like task APIs and simulation, all these other APIs coming out, which is based on, like you say, all the feedback. So I think hopefully in the next Ignite, we'll see how some of this probably comes about in terms of the journey of some of these things. But no, it's good to see. I think from a developer's perspective, absolutely. I think it's a minefield anyways. I'm not a developer by any stretch of imagination from this perspective, but certainly I think it helps me to have those conversations anyways in terms of what is being baked out there and potentially what organizations can do if they want to kind of take further kind of interest into these areas.
Yes.
And then
exactly.
Yeah, and then the security compliance, again, I mean, this is just a big one, but I mean, again, I've just tried to put as little as possible within that. I think a lot of the stuff, like you mentioned, Albert, earlier on, a lot of it has gone, kind of in GA, like the retention for Teams private channels, for example.
Right.
Multi-geo was always there for SharePoint, OneDrive, and now Teams has gone GA on that as well. So that kind of almost from that information.
That was a big gap, that channel and chat conversation not being multi-geo while all the files were. So that's huge. That means it's actually helped us roll out chat in Germany with Teams. Before, they've only been able to do meetings and not actually take part in chat. Now they can be hosted in Germany. Great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think also being able to automatically applying the retentions, right, on a sensitivity label, that's got to be huge as well, right? Based on if it's a highly confidential label, then say apply 7 years or whatever it is to it. That makes it easier. But also, I think Albert, you mentioned about co-authoring some things with the Office documents. What I wanted to find out more from that was more from where's it gone? Was it Teams messages? No. Yeah, this one here. The version of a file. I think we mentioned just a few minutes ago a thing where if you're posting a link on the chat or as a file link, and that file's being worked upon, that kind of goes up, and to be able to see what particular version of the file was. I think Paul, it was you who mentioned earlier, I think, and that's in public preview now, isn't it? So that you can actually lock that particular version of file that was based the decision on, based on that documentation, for example, as well as attaching on Outlook emails. So I think that part is quite good to see in terms of in public preview around preserving that version of the file that you shared in Teams.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's a lot of things here on the slide. Those are a lot of the things I wanted to mention as well. So kudos. Yeah, and there's a couple of things which might seem either trivial or what's the big deal, but they are a big deal. For example, let me see if it's on here as well. If you place a hold right now on an environment, then any version will be stored when it's either modified or deleted from that environment, the SharePoint site, for example. And that's going to change as well. So they're doing things with the versioning of that hold library, for example. There's also what I thought very important was the incorporation of you already stated here syntax support for sensitivity labels, but that's now GA. But there's also things like the exact data match and trainable classifiers, which now can be used for information protection. Those were, of course, already available for data governance, retention labels, and the retention policies, but now they're also available for information protection. So you see that there's a lot of enhancements in the security and compliance sphere. So it's I love the way where Microsoft is going with this. It's like I said, it's getting more and more mature. A lot of organizations I work with still consider Microsoft to be less mature than it really is on this subject. So they're still looking at other document management or record management platforms. Because they still think Microsoft can't deliver, and I think they're still they're getting there. Let's be honest. There's still platforms out there which were already a record management system even before SharePoint was born, for example. So they kind of have an edge, I think. But they're really getting there on security and compliance.
No, it's good to see, and I think also a couple of other items on that as well is on the SharePoint Admin Center, isn't it? We can now see the channel sites as well now, so private channels and any other sites associated with those. That's a big one, I'm sure, for SharePoint admins to have a look at those.
Yeah, but also from an admin's perspective, it's getting more, or compliance officer's perspective, it's getting more easy to work with the platform. For example, if you want to have with advanced e-discovery right now, it works with a concept called custodians, and with that concept you can basically say, well, I want to retain this entire Teams environment, and then you already get the conversations and the documents, and not the private channels you still need to add yourself, but I think that's coming as well, and then you have your entire environment you want to store and hold for e-discovery, for example. So there's a lot of so some are small, some are large enhancements really to the compliance side of Microsoft 365.
Yeah, good. And I think kind of moving on, just conscious of time-wise as well. But I think, in terms of the other apps and services outside of Teams and SharePoint, I think just before Kevin went, I think, Context IQ, that was there. So that's I see that as more of a background kind of thing, whether you're working in Outlook or Teams or anywhere else, and being able to have those things attached. If you're attaching a file, then it kind of recalls some of those people who you might want to, picking up on who you kind Connect and so forth, or even the recent files based on that sensitive. So that's good to see, I think, in terms of where that's going to come first onto Microsoft Editor. But then obviously you got this Clipchamp as well, that's kind of expanding within that Office suite as well. So being able to have that, as it says, in browser video creation, editing experiences, recording studio in PowerPoint, being able to customize your own background for it, and being able to.
I love this one.
Nights. That one is pretty good.
Recording studio in PowerPoint, really powerful. I mean, I don't know if you saw the demo, but basically, I built my PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I record myself. I've done a 45-minute thing, and I go back through it and I think, oh hell, I've spelt that wrong. You can go and edit the slide, and then re-export the video without re-recording, and it just replaces the slides in the background. That's amazing. I mean, that's amazing. A huge productivity saver. I'm really, and that with Cameo, the ability to take your camera and move it in the slide. So one of the big problems with PowerPoint Live at the moment is you're always in that bottom right hand corner. So you've got to fit your content around that space in the slide. But with Cameo, we can move the camera around the content. And now that's coming obviously to PowerPoint Live as well. But then with things like Recording Studio, recording training videos, and combine that with Clipchamp, being able to quickly edit them, add titles, it's huge. I mean, I don't have to go and spend $300 on Camtasia now. I can just use Clipchamp. So yeah, these are, I think, great additions, especially when we're moving into the kind of workplace now where people want to consume information in very different ways. We've got the new Stream, so I can record a quick training video or a quick announcement in PowerPoint. I can quickly edit it in Clipchamp. I can upload it into Stream, which is surfacing now in SharePoint. That whole, it doesn't have to be a news article, or it doesn't have to be a Yammer post. It can be a video message. There's just great ways of getting the content out there. This then can surface up in Viva Learning or Viva Connect. There's just becoming nicely integrated.
More connected experience, isn't it? I think it kind of gels together, right, in terms of the flow of doing that work. I mean, I know just going back earlier point around Camtasia, the amount of time and effort I spent sometimes just to figure things out around moving the image and around it, and that's just like.
And it's Camtasia is a great example where I'll record myself over some slides, and it's at that point where I realise, oh hell, I've got a spelling mistake or something. So being able to not have to re-record that, but keep the same audio, the same video, me talking to it, and all that happens is I've just corrected that spelling mistake. That's huge.
Good. And then a couple of things there as well around in Excel, in particular the new JavaScript API that's kind of in preview, and this is probably huge, I guess, from an Excel point of view, because not only being able to store your numbers and text and all that in the cell values, but I know we've got stocks and the geographic country maps that's been there as well, but this one is more kind of taking it to the next level, isn't it? Around, I don't know if some of you saw this or not, but being able to store your own data from those custom data sources within that in a single kind of cell and kind of work with that. And to me, that just it's a lot more than your flat Excel spreadsheets that you can do. Again, I think I'd like to see that in more reality when that becomes available in preview later this month as to what you can do with that. But that was a big one from an Excel side of things. And then I think Search Federation was mentioned earlier in terms of being able to retrieve and kind of from other providers as well as some of the other line of business applications. Again, early days around that in private preview. And I think if you go on that link, which I'll share the slides afterwards, you can also sign up for some of these things as well. And then, yes, being able to search for stream videos based on what was said, that's probably a big one as well. Because when that's kind of all transcripted out, I'm sure there's going to be other areas of what to say, when things get recorded. That'll be kind of almost interesting. But how that becomes searchable easily is a big one. Plus ones on that. Office.com, whenever I work with anyways, with the clients or whatever, that's probably my first port of call anyways, office.com, just to see what my day looks like or what's driving my day. A couple of additions there coming is my content page, being able to, just kind of work across all your team SharePoint, being able to search, filter, but also being able to create your page, to put all the things in one place, being able to create your lists and documents all from that office.com, the app bar there as well. The one that I'm looking forward to, I think, is probably coming next quarter, is the being able to search documents or meetings by people. I think that will be quite a good one, because not all very well, right, to be able to search for files and folders and things or whatever from there, but being able to search what files belong to which people, that'll be a kind of another slice, I guess, to see from that search perspective on the office.com. Power Platform, I know there was a couple of big ones there as well, in terms of the main one was, I guess, the mobile apps and Power, with Power Apps in preview. So kind of making, I guess, in particular, I think the IT admins being able to distribute that through, Intune or Endpoint Manager now, or other third party. That's got to be a huge, being able to control your Canvas apps, if you like, being able to distribute through that kind of MDM. And pay as you go, that was probably that big one as well, being able to control the costing and being able to link to your Azure subscription. So whether you got one for HR or finance, being able to then at least control that costings around that, instead of having to license per app or per user. So that was probably a long time coming, I think, but good to see that's in public preview. And then I think from Power Automate side of things, the process mining, that was quite a good demo to see in terms of how some of the things you can optimize around being able to work out some of the flows and the analytics behind all the insights. That was pretty nice to see in terms of what that comes about. Was there anything else on Power Platform side of things from your point of view, anyone?
Well, from my point of view, it's very interesting to see what there's being done on the governance side, the environments, the connectors, the specific actions you can now configure within those connections. For example, just a quick example. I really want to read tweets, but I don't want people to be able to send out a tweet. So you can now configure the connector just to do that. So there's a couple of enhancements on that area as well.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, good one. And then a Power BI app that became available as well. So in Teams, being able to kind of install and run that, that's probably a big one as well. The experimental co-authoring, I don't think that's a real-time kind of authoring. I think that's a starting point, being able to at least work together and avoid the logs that you get when somebody's editing the Power App. So I guess that's probably a starting point before it gets to the real-time co-authoring, as we normally see in the documents on that. So yeah, some good ones there on the Power Platform.
I think the pay-as-you-go one's quite interesting there. Sorry, just the thing to watch for that. I mean, it's great to for kind of the piloting and the launching, but just be aware that the license price that way is twice the price. So it might be $5 for a per user license. If you do it through the Azure subscription, it's $10. So just watch that pricing.
It's like, how much is your killer app?
Yeah, it's very much I think about getting people into the ecosystem. And they're going to very quickly realize it's cheaper to just go down the per user or per flow licensing in the future.
Yeah, but it's good to see, right, the options out there now. So there's sometimes we see the moans, right, like we've seen on.
You have those conversations with clients saying, but we need like $500 a month upfront before we can even develop this app. And they're like, what? This way we can link it to an Azure subscription. They can use it with 5 to 10 people, and they think this works for us. It does what we want. Now let's go and license people properly. So I think it's a good entry point.
No, good stuff. Good point. And then I think on the Windows side of things, I know, Neil, you covered earlier on. I think a couple of things. The test base for Microsoft 365, to me, that looks quite interesting, because the fact that you can try out your own proprietary applications on your Windows platform. It's an Azure-based service, so that's got to be a good thing in terms of being able to not worry about the infrastructure or anything else that goes around it, and being able to test that out. But also I think the universal print side of things, especially I saw the OneDrive demo side of things, being not having to worry about installing the print drivers and being able to just search for it, and there you have it in terms of being able to print. Neil, did you want to cover off anything else? I know there's an MVP award program that's been announced as well. So for anyone interested in Windows 365, certainly that's a good opportunity for anyone to try and work towards the MVP program for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other thing which I found interesting around that as well is obviously the Defender stuff. I don't think anyone's mentioned that yet, which they split the Defender licensing up as well, which I know is always a big problem. So to get sort of Defender for endpoint, you used to have like E3 licensing, just like E5. And now they kind of split it up into sort of Defender for endpoint Plan 1 and Plan 2, where you can get Plan 1 on E3. Which I thought was quite good because it's making sort of high security for most, because a lot of people just have E3 licensing, right? Because the pricing point from E3 to E5 is quite high. Not a lot of people have E5, so I thought that was good. And yeah, the Windows Update for Business one's quite good as well, because obviously, I mean, Microsoft are pushing very much towards management via Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Intune. So what they're looking for is you want to manage your device. They don't want to have your configurations device specific. Okay, so the way Microsoft are going with this is, I don't care if you're Windows 11. I don't care if you're Windows 365. I don't care if you're an iPad. I don't care what device you are. I want these policy settings to be applied. And that's really, really good. I mean, obviously, sort of MDM/Intune used to be very much towards mobile devices like your phones and your iPads and those kind of stuff. But now Microsoft, especially down the Azure Virtual Desktop route as well, they're trying to make all those stuff accessible and manageable via Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is a really, really good way, because I know a few companies who are now using that as their central management strategy compared to like going away and doing SCCM, or because I used to walk into companies and you have this guy managing these physical devices, this guy's managing these virtual devices, these guys managing these MDM devices. Now we're trying to bring everything into that central resource where we're going to apply all those security policies via MDM/Intune and apply those policies to, I don't care what device you are getting this security policy, whatever it is. And so that's especially like the Windows Update, the business stuff, that's sort of feeding everything into Intune as well. So it's really, really good to see Microsoft. So they've made a lot of stride over the past 2 years in regards to this stuff. So it's good to see.
Sheer speed.
Yeah.
Good. Conscious of time wise, so we're just coming to an end. I'll probably grab another 5 minutes if I may. The rest of the slides I won't go in more detail because this is already published, and you may already have some of the slide decks from the sessions. But a few of the slides here are the roadmap slides in terms of what's coming, and then there's a lot more from not just from SharePoint, OneDrive, but also from lists and what have you. I think especially with the list templates, with biz apps and rules, being able to see those packaged. But I'll probably leave you to go through these slides because there is no further info around this, the roadmap side of things. But interesting stuff, certainly, for me anyway, to keep me busy in terms of what's coming out for over the next year, and being able to try some of these things out. As well as the roadmap for Viva Connections and Insights and topics in particular, I think is more from the external sources with graph content connectors, as well as the topic highlights that I'm kind of really looking forward to. But also from a Viva Learning side, I think there's a few things. Reporting and analytics is the big one, I think, in terms of how the learning is getting consumed. That'll be really interesting to see in terms of what that looks like. But yeah, I think for just to kind of wrap up, really, I think there's a couple of things, as you may heard, there's the Cloud Skills Challenge from Microsoft Ignite. There's about, I think, 8 different learning paths you can participate. If you haven't already, then do look out for that. You can earn yourself a free certification exam for that. And if you do take more than one, it doesn't matter. You only just get one certification exam and not 2 or 3 like that. So do take a look if you haven't, and so it'll be good to get that. As some of you may know, I live by Twitter because I get a lot of updates and all that, and just kind of check things out. So kind of I've put all the stuff that I've gone through today with all the links and everything else. You'll find that in the Twitter moments with all the commentaries and updates from various tweets and so forth. So do take a look at that as well. And then obviously Book of News is by far one of the best ways to digest a lot of this in more detail and with the links to all these various articles. So I'm sure a lot of you have got hold of this. If not, then there's the link there, news.microsoft.com, or if you just search for Book of News, and you'll get to it very quick. So just want to say big thanks to our MVP guests, Neil, Paul, Kevin, Anoop, and Albert. But also, I want to say that there's a session happening, event happening next month on the 8th of December. So if you're able to tune in, then love to have you there as well. But do look out for those topics and register yourselves within that. But if you have any questions and if you have 2-3 minutes, then please unmute yourself. Ask the question. If there's anything that you wanted to kind of want to know more, or maybe we've missed something, otherwise, I'd just like to say a big thanks to everyone for being here and giving up your time and effort, and to kind of just hopefully you've walked away something from this session. So thanks all.